Thank you for the break, Mayor.
It was short but necessary, and I'm just going to wait just a second longer until we get Councilmember Moore on here, and then I think we'll be ready to go.
It still wasn't long enough to get a decent dinner.
Yeah, this is one of those trail mix nights, isn't it?
Council members don't get dinner on
I've
council night.
noticed that. You didn't tell me that beforehand.
Oh,
Well,
I'm
of
sorry.
course we
It was
do.
one of the things I failed to warn you about.
All right, with the council's blessing, I'm going to wait just till it turns 7:36 till we can get our last council member with us and have our full five. And we'll just drag our feet a moment longer. If not, we'll get started, and I'm sure we'll all be at full force soon enough. So bear with me, please.
Sounds like we're a rock band or something, the Fab Five or something.
I don't know, maybe some of you younger ones, but I see myself as a particularly old and extremely dissipated roadie more for you, probably.
Councilmember Moore is here.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Ford. All right. So with that, I'm going to say good evening and welcome everybody to this joint meeting of the Cotati City Council and the successor agency to the former Cotati Community Redevelopment Agency for Tuesday, February 22. This is our regular meeting. Apologies for being a few minutes late, but we were coming from a previous meeting, so we had a little overlap issue. With that, I'm welcoming everybody. And now I'm going to ask our city clerk if we could have a roll call, please.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Sparks.
Here.
Councilmember Ford.
Here.
Vice Mayor Harvey.
Here.
Mayor Landman.
Here. Thank you for that. And next, I'll ask our city manager, just in case we have some different people viewing one more time, if you could introduce our staff to anybody who might be watching this tonight.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. So tonight we have obviously myself, Damien Obid, City Manager. We have Craig Scott, Public Works Director, with us tonight. Angela Corder, our Director of Administrative Services. Noah House, our Director of Community Development. And we also have our City Attorney, John Bacher, joining us. I think he came in as an attendee, but I believe is now with us as a panelist. And I think that rounds it out for now. Thank you, Mayor.
Excellent. Well, thank you. So let's jump right into our Pledge of Allegiance. I'll ask everyone to join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We're almost getting synchronized. Thank you. It's very hard to do. I don't know if the public realizes, but it's almost impossible to do over Zoom. All right, so now we're going to move to item 4, which is approval of the minutes and notice of waiving and reading of all resolutions and ordinance introduced and or adopted on this agenda. This is an action item, and I'll begin by asking the council if there's any corrections or changes to the minutes that need to be made. And these are for our regular meeting for February 8th and our strategic planning special meeting for February 15th. And I'm not seeing any hands or hearing anything. So with that, then, since this is an action item, I'll ask if there's any public comment on this.
Mayor Landman, we currently have no attendees.
Then that makes this easy. We'll bring it back for a motion and a second.
Move to approve.
Thank you, Vice Mayor Harvey. Do we have a second?
A second. It's
Thank
Councilmember
you,
Ford.
Ford. All right, that's Council Members Ford and Vice Mayor Harvey for a second and a first, respectively. Do we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Moore.
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
Yes. All right, so that carries. Thank you very much. This brings us to announcements. So I have a few announcements to read. First, I'll begin with a meeting orientation for new attendees and viewers. In conformance with the Brown Act and the adopted City Council rules, the meeting agenda includes items labeled as action items, where the City Council will consider the item and citizens are afforded the opportunity to provide comments relevant to the item being discussed. The meeting agenda also includes a citizens' business item, which is the designated place on the agenda where citizens have the right to say whatever they wish. The City Council may or may not choose to respond to comments as the government code allows. However, if the City Council declines to respond, it should not be perceived as giving credence to or agreeing with any statements that the City Council or its members believe are incorrect, misinformed, or purposely biased. Next, Measure S supports police services, a variety of recreation programs for all ages, and the maintenance of our streets, parks, and public buildings. You can see details on the web at cotaticity.org. Citizens interested in receiving City of Cotati community alerts via text or email are encouraged to sign up with Nix by downloading the Everbridge app from the iOS or the Android App Store, or by texting your zip code 94931 to 888777. And I'll say again how I love the way they made that so easy to remember, 888777. Like always, we'd love to hear from you. So please feel free to contact the city at 707-792-4600 or email at info@cotaticity.org. Now, if you have a non-emergency issue after normal business hours, you can, of course, contact us at 707-792-4611. And certainly, if you have an emergency, please do contact 911. Continue to look for updates on the city's website and our social media channels, which include Facebook, Instagram, Nixle, and Nextdoor. This brings us to item 6, which is the approval of the final agenda. This is an action item, and I'll ask the city manager first if we have any changes to tonight's agenda.
Thank you, Mayor. No proposed changes.
All right, and I'll look one more time and see, do we have any participants? I'm seeing no participants, so I have checked for public comments. I'm not seeing any. So with that, we will move on to item 7, which is citizens' business. Citizens' business and public comment for consent calendar items. And I'd like to read something for that any member of the public wishing to speak to the council on any item or items listed on the consent calendar, or any matter or matters not listed on the agenda that are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the council, may do so at this time. Pursuant to the Brown Act, the council is not allowed to consider issues or take action on any item that is not listed on the agenda during this period. Pursuant to City Council Policy 2021-01, comments of any member of the public are normally restricted to a total of 3 minutes in length per person for matters not on the agenda, and a total of 3 minutes per person in length for any and all items on the consent calendar. The mayor may extend the time limit for a reasonable time when a disability accommodation has been requested. And I will just check my participant list, and I am seeing no participants. I will encourage the city clerk, if she sees something's changed, to alert me too. But with that, then we will move with no citizens' business. This brings us to our consent calendar, and we have no consent items tonight. So there's nothing to do there, which jumps us to directions on future agenda items. So I'll ask the council if there's anything coming forward tonight. I'm not seeing any hands come forward right now. So we'll move on to item 10, which is our regular agenda. And we have 3 items tonight, and we'll begin with the first one, which is 10A. And this is a letter of support for SETA 2022 TIRCP application. And I'll ask for the staff presentation on that, please.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So the state loves a good acronym. So TIRCP is basically it's the state. It's created by state law. It's a state funding source. The source of the money is cap and trade dollars from polluters, basically. And the overarching intent for that money is by the state law is for GHG reduction projects, specifically to reduce GHG by expanding and increasing transit, integrating rail, and also improving transit safety. That's kind of the big buckets of, or big categories of things that these funds are generally supposed to be used for. And as you saw in the packet, the Sonoma County Transportation Authority is submitting a $25 million grant application to the state for the most recent round of these TIRCP funds. And it's actually a pretty robust example of regional cooperation on this, which is nice to see. So the County of Sonoma, Santa Rosa, Petaluma, each with their transit systems, their bus transit systems, as well as SMART and the transit partners to the north of us, which is Mendocino Transit Authority. And you can see in the staff report, there's bulleted items that they're, and also in the attached template example letter of support. But basically, the money, if it was awarded by the state, would be used for purchase of 30 zero-emission buses and the associated charging infrastructure, passenger amenities for Petaluma Transit, construction of the SMART Petaluma North commuter rail station. This was, I don't know if you recall, but as SMART was building north, they skipped that station, mostly as a cost-saving measure, trying to get as far north as they could with the money they had. And then finally, network integration planning and implementation to build on existing integration efforts between the various bus services. So it's Petaluma Transit, Santa Rosa City Bus, Sonoma County Transit, and to improve those bus connections to SMART, as well as Mendocino Transit Authority and other operators within Sonoma County. So like I mentioned, there's a sample letter attached, and the requested action is to authorize the mayor to sign on behalf of the city. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
All right. And the first hand I saw pop up was Mr. Ford. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Mayor Lyman. So, Damien, my only question is whether Cotati had anybody in the room when this grant application was being designed.
I do, well, it came, I believe, before the SCTA board, but actually in the design of the application, I'm not aware of it if there was. Yeah.
Yeah, it came before us as a board, Councilmember Ford, but it was, to the best of my knowledge, unless staff may have worked in other places, it was basically the grant itself was put together by the staff.
SCTA staff in conjunction
Yes.
with Petaluma and Santa
And
Rosa.
working, I'm sure, with Mendocino as well, in concert.
Thanks. I'll save my comments till after public comment.
All right, good. Vice Mayor Harvey.
Yes, I have a question about the connections to SMART. Do you know if there's any considerations in there for having bus services from the SMART station in Windsor to the airport? That last mile is a little bit of a jaunt, and you can't get a taxi to take you. You can't get an Uber to take you. You can't, I've walked it, but it's not exactly the easiest. It seems like that should be considered. And do you know if it is?
I'm not aware of that. Usually the last mile continues to be one of the more vexing problems. And I think that's not because of the diversity of different last miles we have to deal with in this region, but also a reflection of how overwhelmed the various transit systems are, perhaps particularly the county, with the service that's needed and the service they're able to require. Just a quick reminder for my colleagues, and some of the new council members might have missed this, but a couple of years ago when we were looking at reauthorizing for Measure DD, there was a lot of discussion of how could we fund a really 21st century transit system in this area. That would be something significant. And staff spent some time on it, and the recognition came that if we took every single cent that we were to get from an increased allocation from Measure DD for over 30 years, everything that we spend on highways, local roads, transit, buses, smart, every single bit, it wasn't enough to even get partially there. So that gives you an idea of the challenge of trying to do more with transit, and maybe that explains a little. But honestly, if you'd like, I can ask for some further information on last mile to Windsor to the airport and get
Right.
back to you
That airport
offline and at next
station
meeting.
there. Yeah, that'd be awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Yeah, I can find that out. Anybody else would say, I'll send it to the city manager and have him send it out to the whole council. That would
And
make more
Mayor,
sense.
actually, and Council or Vice Mayor Harvey, it might be helpful just to know too that for that very specific example between Windsor and the airport station,
Mhm.
they're building that right now, that section of SMART. So I expect that by the end of the calendar year, SMART will be actually going to Windsor. And then, but still, I think that maybe the larger question is, what is Sonoma County Transit doing with their, because I know that they have spent some resources to try to create kind of a bus rail system so that as SMART builds north, but it hasn't gotten there yet, that there's connecting buses to the farthest north stations. So anyway, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but
Yeah, it just would be helpful. There's the station there, at the maintenance yard, and it's a very nice station, but getting from that station to the airport, like I said, a taxi will not take you. They refuse fare. So yeah, that needs to be addressed. So thank you.
Agreed. A lot of work to do in transit. Any other questions from the council? I am not seeing any hands go up. So I will open this. Let's check for public comment very quickly.
Mayor
I am
Lemon,
not
there'll be no
seeing-
public comment.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any new attendees. Thank you. So I'll bring it back then for discussion. And I believe, Mr. Ford, you mentioned you had some comments.
Thank you. Yes. I will support sending this letter, but it's a little bit of a hard ask because I feel that Save Smart, that the transit agencies involved do a very poor job of serving Cotati and Rohnert Park. So our local bus service is pathetic, absolutely pathetic. Like I can get from here to Sonoma State, but not back, etc. So there's the fact that, Petaluma with its 60,000 people and is, singled out for a fair bit of this money, and Rohnert Park and Cotati with their combined 50,000 people, as far as I can tell, get very little out of it, is a bit of a hard ask. So I'm excited about the zero emission buses, and I think we need to move in that direction. So I'll support sending the letter, but this is a longer term project, I guess, to try to figure out how we can get, as you said, Mayor Landon, like it's a huge issue and there's not enough money to do it, but we are very much more poorly served than our neighbors to either the north or south. Thanks.
Thank you. I'll ask if anybody else has any comments in the council. Let's see, I'm not seeing any other hands go up. I'll just mention a couple things. First of all, I will note this request did come from SCTA staff to our staff to ask me to agendize this. So as your representative from SCTA, I did check with the CM and followed our new procedure. And he did indicate that he felt this was not time or resource heavy and could be brought with minimal effort. So that's why you're seeing this. I liked myself. I thought it was a smart way to benefit the entire region. I give some credit to staff for pulling that together because it helps transit in 2 counties. And Mendocino is served worse than we are generally. So by doing this, it helps them. And of course, it works for us because when you have something like this, it makes the grant more competitive because you're serving not just 1 county and several different systems, but multiple counties. And that, to my mind, I have some concerns about regionalism when it gets too large. Sometimes it misses what's really going on in the communities. But in this case, I think it's not bad. I take your point, Mr. Ford, and you're absolutely correct. I will, just to make you feel better, I will tell you from conversations I've heard for years at SCTA, your concerns about the service of transit here in Cotati and Roanoke Park are agreed to, but people who have their own bus systems, whether it's Santa Rosa or Petaluma, also complain just as stringently about the service they get there. So I think the good news, if it could be called good news, it's uniformly bad everywhere in the county. We do, unfortunately, depend on the county. Santa Rosa, with its size, has a system, and Petaluma, being the second largest city, does too. As to what the future will hold, I don't know. There's a lot of work in looking at letting those three systems work to share resources, and perhaps that eventually looks like some way of lowering costs and improving services by having them work together. Mayor Chris Rogers of Santa Rosa has been heading that committee, and we'll see where that goes. But that might be a good thing and perhaps will help. So with that, we are looking for a motion to authorize the mayor to sign this. So we've gone to public comment. We have discussion. I'll ask if anybody would like to move this.
So moved.
I'll
Thank
second.
you. So that's Vice Mayor Harvey moving and a second from Councilmember Moore. I'll ask for a roll call vote, actually.
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landon.
Yes. All right, thank you. That passes unanimously on a 5-0 vote. Let's see, this brings us to item 10B, and this is a scope change for sewer inflow and infiltration reduction project. And I'll ask for our staff presentation. This, I believe it might be from Mr. Scott, our Director of Public Works and City Engineer.
Yes, thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Craig Scott, City Engineer and Public Works Director. This item is to request City Council's approval of changing the scope of services for the sewer infiltration and inflow reduction project. The planned repaving of West Sierra Avenue as part of the Quick Strike project in the spring of next year has made the replacement of the sewer in that roadway a priority. The existing sewer has defects and is undersized and is not getting to it ahead of the roadway project would mean delaying the project for about 5 to 10 years or digging up a newly paved roadway. The significance of the scope change is also on the city's sewer enterprise budget. The budget needs for construction would be significantly higher at over $1 million compared to about $500,000 for a sewer repair project that we have been thinking about and planning for. The ongoing sewer rate study is running options to accommodate the $1 million sewer project for next fiscal year. Just as a reminder, back in November of 2021, so not too long ago, this item was brought before council for approval of the design contract with Brelgy and Race, which we're asking for the scope change for. So the sewer project, it's a priority for us to reduce infiltration and inflow into the sewer system because these flows contribute to a large part of our enterprise budget. About over 70% of our budget goes to the city of Santa Rosa for the treatment services they provide. And so for a number of years now, we've been identifying areas of the sewer collection system that have potential high incidence of inflow and infiltration. So inflow is where the surface water somehow finds its way into the sewers, and infiltration is where groundwater enters the sewers. And so we've videotaped about 2 miles of sewer, and the repair efforts would take, it's not like we can do these all in 1 year. It would take over the next 5 or 10 years to gradually, incrementally get to these repairs. And the videotapes that we've done are of looking at the entire sewer system. We're like, well, what areas are likely to have high infiltration and inflow? In the sewer master plan back in 2010, there were flow monitors installed around the city. And so the city was divided into about 10 basins. And so we know what areas have higher than normal in INI. And then within that, we identified about 2 miles of sewer that are deeper and in areas of higher groundwater. So that's just putting our arms around the what we consider the low-hanging fruit of tightening up our system. So before us, we've got about 128 identified defects, and those have been categorized in a number of categories, 43. And these defects are joint offsets, root intrusions, holes, just simple holes in the sewer pipe, gravel deposits, which gravel from the sewer bedding is getting into the sewer. There's one category just called gusher, where water is seen to be flowing into the sewer, and deterioration of pipe. Defects are all the defects that are in the laterals are also noted in the videos. And I believe there's 17 laterals in West Sierra Avenue that we're looking at. All right, so the methods to repair the defects include spot repairs. So just digging down and fixing the offset joint or the hole or the defective pipe, or doing slip lining, just relining that piece of sewer, or doing open trench pipe replacement. But even the trenchless methods still require sizable access pits and are a concern for newly paved streets. Basically, it is unavoidable to dig up the street when doing repairs. The city's aggressive street paving program is forcing our hand because we're forced to look to prioritize sewer pipeline repairs so that we can avoid digging up newly paved streets. Overlapping the identified pipeline defects with the roadway paving program shows that the pipeline within West Sierra Avenue should be a high priority, as that roadway is slated for rehabilitation in the spring next year. Other pipeline defects are also high priorities for repair soon after, including those in Cypress Avenue, which is to be repaved as early as the summer of 2024. And some streets, including Park Avenue and Old Redwood Highway, are not identified for major street rehabilitation anytime soon. So we have some discretion on the timing of those sewer repairs. The approved budget for the current INI reduction program for designing it is sufficient for the to switch out spot repairs of these defects, sort of all, just taking a piece of that 2 miles of sewer and doing some spot repairs. It's sufficient to be switched out and applied to a sewer replacement project from Olaf Street in West Sierra Avenue all the way to Water Street. And that is not only a piece of pipeline that has sewer defects in it, but it's identified in the sewer master plan as being undersized for existing flows, not to mention future flows, but it's undersized today. So it's got the defects, the undersized existing sewer capacity, and it's underneath this roadway that's slated for major street reconstruction in the spring of next year. With the recommended approval of the scope of services, with changing that scope of services, design would proceed with the pipeline replacement in West Sierra Avenue, and upon the construction, once we would also need, there's a few things that have to come together, right? We're not getting all the pieces right now. With anticipated requested council's approval tonight would just get us the design. We would also need the sewer rates to be adjusted sufficiently to support that. And it also includes, and we'll hear about that when we hear the rate presentation anticipated in late April, how loans, intercity loans, and a rate adjustments would enable us to afford this project. But then we'd also have to, in our current ongoing budget process, see a funding amount of about $1 million for this project in fiscal year 22-23 to support this pipe replacement project. So that was one of the reasons for bringing this before council at this time, even though the change of scope still aligns with the original purpose, which is to correct sewer defects. It's the cost increase, which I think we all need to be aware of for future discussions on this. So with that concludes the presentation. I'd be happy to respond to any questions you might have.
Well, thank you, Mr. Scott. I'm going to look through my colleagues. I see a hand from Vice Mayor Hardy. Please go ahead.
I just want to be clear, this is only West Sierra and nothing to do with Cypress.
We are prioritizing, yes, we are prioritizing the sewer replacement of the pipeline in West Sierra Avenue, correct?
Okay, so there's nothing, because you mentioned in your talking that also Cypress might be affected. It concerns me because of where I live. I want to be sure that I'm, recusing appropriately. So if this is just West Sierra, I am far enough away. So that's why I'm asking.
So you get a brief reprieve, but Cypress is the next one in line. It's
Okay.
We need to, after we're done with West Sierra Avenue, we need to get hopping on pipe repair replacements in Cypress.
Okay.
Because, yeah.
I just wanted to be sure I was okay on this one. Thank you.
Let me just look one more time. My colleagues, I am not seeing any questions. Let me look to my participant list. I am again seeing no participants, which means we have no public comment. So I did try to open it, but we have no comments at this point. So I'll bring it back and see if we have any discussion from the council. And I see a hand from Councilmember Sparks.
Thank you. I don't know if this is a question for Mr. Scott or Mr. Obed, but with the increased costs, can you just talk about how you see that fitting into our budget and what effect that would have on other projects for the next fiscal year?
Damien, I could handle that if that's okay.
Yeah, go ahead, Craig.
Okay. So the sewer enterprise fund is a self-sustaining fund. It can get inter-department loans from the water fund, for example. But what we're largely talking about is the sewer enterprise funds, and what would enable us to do this project would be a little higher rate adjustments than we've seen in the past 5 years. Still keeping it to single digits, we hope for. The sewer capital program has been spending about $300,000 a year over the last 5 years. We're anticipating that to be bumped up to about $500,000 on average for the next 5 years. So we're looking at a little higher expenditures in the sewer fund.
And yeah, Craig, I'll just add too that we're still working with the draft financial model right now. So it is limited purely to sewer related projects because it's an enterprise, as Craig said. So if it displaces any project or delays a project, it's a sewer project. And how it gets funded will dictate what sort of impacts it may have on rates and the timing of other projects. There's a lot of different factors that we're still considering right now.
Okay, thank you.
Right, let me look one more time. I will ask quickly. I'm just curious, in years past, until fairly recently, we've just depended on essentially visual examination where we could see signs like subsidence in roads or wearing of subsidence of our asphalt. And now we actually have a more intrusive electronic system that allows us to essentially see inside the sewers. So we're finding these things. I'm curious how much of our sewer system comes still from the original county sewer it was here, more than a half century ago. I bet we still have some of that.
That's a great question, and I don't have an answer for that. It's not something that's readily published in our master planning documents. We'd have to kind of do a research project and go through all the improvement plans and see and ask our old timers here, superintendent, for what their assessment of that is. So I'm sorry I don't have a readily.
That's okay. It did need to be answered. I was just curious, and I think personally it points. I'm glad to see us getting up. These are important infrastructure issues, the type of things where deferred maintenance is a huge problem down the line, and to be able to be getting ahead on is a good thing, even if finding some unexpected new expenses doesn't feel like a good thing at the time. Nevertheless, I'll just say in general, considering that we pay for processing of any infiltration through the sub-regional system, and it's already our biggest expense, the idea of having something called a gusher doesn't sound very good. So generally the idea of taking care of infiltration and also not tearing up a new road, I do agree that it seems worthwhile to me to move this up. And with everything else, I like the way the rest of it, you're trying to spread these costs out over years, because certainly we need to do that as well. So if there's no further comments from the council with this, we're being asked for a motion, approved by motion, the revising of this scope. And I'm seeing a hand from Councilmember Ford.
I'll move to approve the revision of the scope of services for the sewer design as proposed.
Thank you,
Second.
Councilmember Ford. And I heard a second from Vice Mayor Harvey. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Can we have a roll call vote, please?
Councilmember Moore,
Yes.
Councilmember Ford,
Yes.
Councilmember Sparks,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Harvey,
Yes.
Mayor Landman.
Yes. All right, thank you, everybody. That passes on a 5-1. And this brings us to item 10C. This is the last thing on our regular agenda. And this is a recommendation that we discussed moving into a 2-year budget and provide direction to staff, which is a perfect time to segue to the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. This might seem like Groundhog Day since we just talked about this, but the initial conversation was really just to take a temperature and see if it's like, if there's any interest at all in pursuing this. So the idea here was to have a little bit more of a fuller conversation about what this actually might look like if we were to move forward on something like this, from the public perspective, from the council's perspective, and from the staff's perspective. So in Sonoma County, and I don't know if we talked about this during our strategic planning meeting, but the town of Windsor and city of Healdsburg are 2 cities that use a 2-year budget in this county. The considerations are largely what we talked about before, so I won't go through them verbatim, but basically the idea would be that it would be 2 single-year budgets adopted essentially at one time initially, and then there'd be quarterly updates. How the process would work is it'd be quarterly updates to the council on financials, and then the start of the 2-year process would be very much like we do now, where we'd have strategic planning, general fund study session, enterprise and project study session, and then separately we have capital projects going through planning commission and council. So all those kind of come together into a budget, except instead of a single-year budget, the idea is that it would be a 2-year budget. And then, as I mentioned, quarterly updates through the cycle, but at the end of the first year of the 2-year cycle, then the idea, the general concept would be that it would still be a strategic planning conversation where we talk about everything we're working on, and that would be sort of a formal opportunity to, look at kind of where things are, progress wise, and if there's new things that want to be added or considered. then that would be sort of the formal time to do it. Of course, as it is now, if things come up along the way that need to be considered sooner for whatever reason, they're time sensitive, then they just get picked up and considered separately, like we do today. And most of these kind of things, at least the expectation is most of these kind of things are our general operations are pretty steady from year to year, so they're fairly easy. Revenues and expenditures are relatively easy to project for general operations. Capital, we just had a conversation about a project that kind of popped up unexpectedly, but generally we kind of know what we're looking at 5 years out, so that's fairly predictable. The thing that generally comes up most frequently is our projects that they're not necessarily capital projects or sort of day-to-day operations. They tend to be ordinance work, typically either city manager or community development type projects, where it's kind of where the city meets the community, and that inevitably seems to be the place where the most new things come up, where there's something happening in the community, and that could be the Cotati community, or it could be regionally, something's going on that wasn't anticipated. And that results in, expediting some ordinance work, as an example. And that could have some trail on, it could result in either reprioritization of existing work, or it could result in hiring consultants that we didn't expect to hire, or some combination of the two. So that's, by and large, that's mostly what we would see in terms of changes, I think, just based on what I've seen. And from a staff, the city has been every year getting awards for our budgets and for our audits and the abbreviated budgets and abbreviated audits. So we have, a lot of just all that is it's a heavy lift every year. And so part of what this would do is would enable us to kind of do 2 years at one time and do the heavy lift 1 year, and then sort of, fine tune through the year if we need to, and then have a full check-in at the midpoint, so between years 1 and 2, through strategic planning and budget adjustments, and then continue into the next year. So, the thought is, that it would be, from a staff perspective, it would just be a bit more efficient with our time, so we could spend time on other things, rather than producing documents every year. And then also, I think it would also help encourage just, I know it's just 1 year went from 1 year to 2 years, but it could also help encourage, more multi-year thinking, in parallel with the 5-year forecast that we'd be doing in parallel with this. So I think that kind of covers all the points, so I'll stop there, but happy to answer questions. And I know Angela's here too, if there's more detailed questions about accounting and how that would work.
All right, so I will flip this to the council. I'll check real quickly here. And I'm seeing Vice Mayor Harvey's hand up, followed by Councilmember Ford. So let's start with Vice Mayor Harvey, please.
So Damien, you sort of alluded to the fact that we create full budget documents, and then we have applied in the past for awards and all that. How will that work? Will we create one? And how does the auditing work? Because if we only have to have it audited, one document every 2 years, I would think that there would also be cost savings from that perspective, because those are not free. We have to pay to have an audit. So can you help me with that a little bit?
Well, yes. It saves us on the front end, but on the back end. So, it would save us, and my understanding is, and Angela can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but in terms of budget creation, we would create basically 2 single, year budgets, and that would all go to GFOA and CSFMO, and they would look at those for the awards. And so we wouldn't do that every year. We would do it every other year. In terms of the audit, though, we would have to close out our books each fiscal year, and they would be audited each year. So there wouldn't be any change there with the audit.
So they really don't recognize 2-year budgets. They only recognize a single year for audit perspective.
Amy, if I can just jump in real quick.
Yeah.
So
question.
the budget document is actually a single document because our goals and objectives are continuous over the period. We can have them identified as separate, but it just adds another column at the end. You know how we have the estimated actuals and we have our proposed budget and then adopted budget. It would just add another column for the next year. So you're still seeing everything side by side on a comparative basis continuously. And with the adoption of our future looking, you know, our 5-year strategic, we would also try to incorporate those things as well. So our budget document still says one budget document every single year or every 2 years, excuse me. And then we would have in place those quarterly updates. And there would be a more robust quarterly update before the initiation of the second fiscal year to make sure it's aligned with where we anticipate that budget that was previously adopted that fiscal year to come out. So that's kind of the budget process. The audit within our audited financial statements, there's always a budget to actual comparison that's included within our financial statements. And so they look at what is adopted for that year. So they look at what's initially adopted, how it's amended, the final ending budget compared to actuals. So they will continue, they make that, they show that within the budget document. So they take into consideration the change in the budget over time, and that's built into the GFOA standards for reporting.
So will we do an audit every year or will it be?
That is a requirement every single year. I believe it's 120 days after fiscal close, you have to have a completed audit.
Okay, so really the only savings is the creation of a single budget document every year and all the work that it takes to get into that, because all the rest of the stuff still has to happen.
Correct. Yeah, it's the
Okay.
efficiencies with creating the numbers for every year. Yeah.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you. Councilmember Ford.
My only question is about the staff's intent about when this would begin. In our discussion last time, I thought we were talking next year. There's something in the packet that made me think you were thinking we were going to produce a 2-year budget this year, which I have some concerns about. So I just want to know what the intent is.
Well, we could begin as soon as this year, hypothetically. You know, it's, I think generally it's, well, I think generally the practice that I've seen, and Angela, you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but the practice that as I've seen is it tends to get created on sort of off-cycle years typically. So it spans and creates sort of multi-years, you know, like it bridges multi-years across the 2-year cycle. Although I don't know if that's just what I've seen. I don't know if that's a standard.
And I guess I could chime in a little bit. I think with already working towards a 5-year plan, you know, a strategic, you know, where are we expecting? We're already creating that second year. It's just not being adopted. A lot of the components that go into it are already our current staffing levels, and that's what addresses our strategic objectives within those staffing levels. We do understand that there are certain consultants and such that are brought in for special projects or, you know, high, you know, demand areas where we might not have capacity, and those are continuously in flux, just like today's meeting presented with the sewer project. Having to fix that may just come at us, and we're just better off to address this, and it is a budget amendment and adjustment per council's approval, and so we do have that built into our policies and procedures currently. And so I think we were just looking for efficiencies and ways that we can continue to move things forward and not hinder that just because it's, you know, short term. So we would like to get this moving forward, but we want to have the intelligent discussion with everyone to make sure that we're addressing things appropriately if possible.
And Councilmember Ford, I don't know if I really addressed that, but basically we could start it, I think whenever, but as Angela said, we're putting together a 5-year forecast, so it wouldn't be difficult to do it this year if that was the desire.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything further from Councilmember Ford. I'm going to assume that for the moment at least answered your questions.
Yes, and I'll have comments later.
Good, thank you. All right, so one more quick look across the dial here. I'm not seeing any more hands up. So I will now take a look and see if we have any last minute participants. And unfortunately, I'm not seeing that. So I'm not going to go to public comment because I have no one to go to. But I will go to discussion and comments because I already heard I have one of those. So seeing as it's a perfect segue, I'm going to start with, actually, I see a hand from Ms. Sparks. Then Mr. Ford, you indicated you wanted to speak. So let's start with Councilmember Sparks.
Sure, thank you. I do remember the discussion last time. Somebody, I think it was Councilmember Ford, I'm not sure. Somebody was talking about the desire to have a greater and more in-depth discussion during our strategic planning in anticipation of doing a 2-year budget. So I would like to see that. I am totally supportive of the idea of a 2-year budget. I think I just would feel more comfortable starting it next year because I don't feel like we had that longer, more in-depth conversation leading up to this one. So that's my 2 cents.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, ditto what Councilmember Sparks said. I feel like making this decision in the middle of our strategic planning process is inappropriate. That the conversation at our first strategic planning meeting, at least from my perspective, would have been different had I known we were talking at that point about a 2-year budget. And so my request would be that this, as I said at that last meeting, I think setting a 2-year budget requires a longer term horizon in our thinking and talking in the strategic planning meetings. And since we weren't doing that last time, this feels not appropriate to me to set a 2-year budget right now. Thanks.
You mean beginning right now, right? Or with this
Yeah,
next year?
Right. I mean, to set a 2-year budget for the fiscal years starting July 1st, 2022. Yeah.
I think we're thinking the same thing. I just wanted to confirm. I think I understood you correctly. Let's see. Yeah, I will say that. Councilmember Moore, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Lehman. Initially last time we talked about this, I kind of made a joke saying, I think it's a great idea. We should start in 2023. That being said, I didn't perceive it as a problem regarding a strategic planning because I don't know if you're going to have that great of a deviation in your strategic planning. I mean, if you're looking at, issues that we're looking at today, how much different are they going to be in 2 years, where we want to try to include some of the goals and objectives that we currently have. So I wouldn't be opposed to it starting this year. I did say that tongue in cheek, but if the council's not comfortable with that, I don't understand where the significant difference in the strategic planning would be. And if you can point out some of the issues, that'd be great. Thank you.
And let's see, I'm going to make a comment before I go back around again, and I saw Councilmember Ford followed very quickly by Vice Mayor Harvey. Yeah, I generally like this idea. I like the idea of a more efficient use of time because we're publishing the budget once. I would be curious how many personnel hours we save, but I think it's enough to be significant and worthwhile, particularly with the numerous budget and audit documents that we do put forward. I think the one thing that I like personally the idea of avoiding mission creep and diverting resources from a multi-year strategic goal, because that's always a challenge for a council and a city to avoid. I guess the biggest question I had too that my colleagues brought up is the 5 meetings that we have listed, is it adequate for this process? And I'm not personally really sure. I'm open to direction from the rest of you. Granted, we're looking at longer term thinking here, twice as long, but I'm not sure that necessarily means we need twice as many meetings either. I don't think anybody's suggesting that. I guess I'd be curious, are we, and I haven't heard this, I thought I'd hear it or hear a question. Are we satisfied with the general process staff has laid out for leading up to it? I'd be curious to hear that. If not, I would suggest when we do start our first 2-year budget, and I think that's where we're going, that first year we put an asterisk on it and we'll try whatever process we pick and assess it. And if it feels like we're time constrained or there isn't enough time, we may wish to expand it. But I'd like to hear from the rest of you on that. As far as immediately embarking on it and counting this year as part of a 2-year or waiting and starting fresh, I personally go either way. I am somewhat moved by the argument since we just did, and we're kind of in the middle of strategic planning really, and we weren't thinking that way, that perhaps we shouldn't change horses in the middle of the stream. So I would lean that way. But those are my thoughts at the moment. So with that, I'd love to hear, it's on us, I think, to nail down if we're satisfied or what we think we'd like to say, at least starting out, should be the process for the 2-year budget. So with that, I'll go to Vice Mayor Harvey and then Councilmember Ford.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, my concern is when we did the initial strategic planning and we looked at some of the things and we heard things that we could do and things that we might have to wait on. I think if we were looking at it through a 2-year lens, we may have to prioritize certain things, knowing how important they are to us, whether we would want them done in the first year or the second year. And I don't feel that we really got the opportunity to do that. And so I think to some degree, I agree with Councilmember Ford. I would have liked to have, kind of talked through that in order to, place the priorities in the first or the second year. So that's my really only concern. There were some things that we know fell down below the line, and knowing that it's 2 years, we might have changed things around a little bit. So that's really my only concern. That the actual moving to that concept, I think, is a great idea, but I think I would prefer that we start the process, as you put it, Mayor, on one horse and stay on that horse until we're at the end of the race. So that's my
I
two.
probably couldn't have done a worse analogy, but hopefully it made a little sense.
It's all right.
Councilmember Ford.
Thanks, Mayor Lynn. So Vice Mayor Harvey made some of my points. Councilmember Moore asked for some examples of what would be different if we were actually looking with a 2-year lens from the beginning of the strategic planning process. One, for example, is I would expect to see from staff 2 years worth of projects on their what they propose to do for the next 2 years if we're going to do, and we only saw one. So we don't have a basis from that first meeting last week or 2 weeks, whenever it was, to think about a 2-year budget, right? We don't have ideas from staff about what those projects are going to look like, things like that. So I think we'd have to start the whole process over with a 2-year lens from everybody, because nobody was thinking of a 2-year budget when we started that strategic planning process. Another example that I would bring up is that, and I mentioned this at the strategic planning meeting, that I was somewhat disappointed with the almost no nods to council priority about diversity and inclusion in the projects that staff proposed. And if we were committing to a 2-year budget, I would ask that council insist on taking that now 1-year-old council priority more seriously in proposing their projects. I expressed my disappointment in that at that strategic planning meeting, but decided that, at least for me, that would just mean I would have to, over the course of this year, push that issue more and see in next year's budget that hope to see that taken up more. But if we set a 2-year budget now, based on the staff listings of projects and with very little, the diversity and inclusion goal mentioned almost not at all, I would I would want to start over again and talk about those projects more and see what we can do to actually address that council priority. Thanks.
All right, thank you. And Councilmember Moore, I see your hand up. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mary Lam, and thank you, Councilmember Ford. I should know better than to ask an academic for examples. In the diversity and inclusion, I don't, I think as we incorporate those moving forward and try to be more inclusive and more diverse, I don't see that that's going to be significantly different from some of the things that we're trying to do now. Now, maybe that's just how I view that moving forward, but thank you for that clarification on that, or that example. For me, being on the council and not running next time, it's going to be easier for me not to adopt it, but it'll be up to the existing council as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you for that. I'll just say I'm after hearing everybody talk, I don't feel terribly strongly about it, but overall I do lean. I think it would be a cleaner start to this process to begin fresh in a 2-year budget construction. That just seems to make sense to me for a lot of reasons. So I'm supportive of that. I think we could add programs if we needed to, but I think that'll be fine. And I'm not here staff pushing that it's absolutely necessary that we save it, that extra document this coming, for this year. So I would be supportive of that. I think that's the direction. I didn't hear anybody specifically point out problems with the existing structure. Are we okay at least then to start this process when we do go to it with the 5 meeting structure? I haven't heard about that. So I'm going to just one more quick round. I see a couple of hands up. If we could just speak to that one point, I'd appreciate that. I see Councilmember Ford and I see Councilmember Sparks.
Okay, sorry, I feel like I'm taking up too much airtime here, but I feel like we'll need to have maybe one earlier discussion. I feel like the council priorities discussion ought to happen before staff assemble their list to talk about how, and then tag them to council priorities. It feels like having those both at the same meeting means that we establish a new priority, like we just bumped up climate change response and adaptation to a top level priority, but it's too late to be incorporated into staff project plans for the coming year. And now we're talking for 2 years. So it feels to me like if we're going to have a conversation about council goals and objectives, that ought to happen, November, December, so that staff can take those into account in the information that we get for the first look at budgeting.
All right, Councilmember Sparks.
I took my hand down because Councilmember Ford sort of took the words out of my mouth. I was going to recommend one additional meeting prior to this project list being developed, because it feels like when we bring a new idea or new project, it's sort of already a matter of, okay, well, where are we going to fit this in, or what are we going to bump down off the list to put this in? And so it'd be nice to have an opportunity to talk about our priorities before that list gets developed for a 2-year situation.
All right, well, I'll just make a final comment on this. I could agree to an extra meeting. I think that would be logical since this is the first time doing this. It's slightly longer, slightly more long-term, that wouldn't hurt. I would say the opposite to that argument that, and I hear it, there's a valid point that when we come into the strategic planning by staff already laying out the work plan that they have, we feel like our bandwidth is limited. Then on the other hand, it might be smart to work in that constraint because we come in and just do pie in the sky, what we'd like to see, the nuts and bolts work of things that has to happen, roads, sewer, all the less exciting, but truly necessary work that we're required to do for the city. We're not going to discount that. It's still going to be there, and we're going to have to then spend a lot of time paring down what we've already listed. But I think it could work either way, and I'd certainly be open to I would suggest if it makes sense to the rest of the council, we have one meeting right now to do that. Why don't we have two? One first pass with staff bringing what they see as the work they think they have to do, us bringing our ideas, kicking it around, going home and all of us licking our wounds, and then coming back a week later and doing it again. Because I think with a 2-year process, it'll probably take that. And I think that might be a good balance of giving us as close as we can get to equal weight to the structural things we have to do for the city, as well as the things we would like to do. So just a suggestion. So I see Councilmember Sparks. Any response to that?
I think that that's a good idea. And as long as we do have time to lick our wounds, as you said, yeah,
Well,
I think that's a good idea. Yeah.
You may notice we have 2 weeks between council meetings. That's not an accident. All right, so if I see some general thumbs up from the council, is there a consensus on that? Is that an acceptable way maybe to approach this, at least just this first time? And certainly our council or any future council can pivot if they find that not workable. I'm seeing a few nods. Councilmember Harvey? Is
Yes,
that a hand up?
I would ask that this kind of be memorialized, as our process, whatever it is. And yes, we can change it as we move forward, but it would be nice to have it laid out in a process so that everyone is aware. That is my only ask.
Okay, I'll let staff decide where that should live, but I definitely would like to see it very clear that this is the agreement we came to, at least as a starting structure, and an additional meeting, an equal weight on council interest for adding new things, and what staff presents as the current workload that they think we need to get accomplished, and plenty of time for us to resolve that. So if that sounds good to everybody, then we've discussed this. I think I'm going to ask staff, do you have adequate direction to work with this, Mr. Obid?
Yeah, I know that all makes, it all seems pretty clear and logical. It makes sense to me. And
Yeah, I think it's a good faith effort by everybody to try and make this work. It's something new, and it's something that irresolvably isn't easy. A lot of competing interests, and as always, bandwidth isn't ideal. But with that, I think this will be a good first start at least. So with that, we're going to segue to the city manager's report.
all right, just when I muted myself. Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. So some hopefully good news on the rainfall front. We may have some rain tonight, although it won't be a lot. So that's I feel different and nice to see. All right, some other updates. COVID testing. The hours have changed out there at the Park and Ride location. It's now used to be 7 to 7. Now it's 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. Same days, Tuesday and Wednesday, and appointments are highly encouraged. Also, the mobile mental health crisis response team, our SAFE team, it is official. The hours have expanded now. So it was 12 hours a day, 7 days a week when it first kicked off. And now it just transitioned to 18 hours per day, 7 days a week. And that's, so it's in sort of in operation 9 a.m. to 3 a.m. each day, 7 days a week. I will just also just encourage everyone, if anyone's watching that is interested in this, because this is a great way to help save resources, is to sign up for auto pay and e-bill for their utilities. And just reiterate something I mentioned the last meeting, that there is water and sewer utility payment assistance available, and that has been out on our website and social media. But there's a variety of ways that we can set people up with payment plans, or just get assistance from the state and federal government through those programs that are set up for that purpose. West Side Project, if you've been out there recently, the pathway over West School Street from the tunnel to West Sierra is basically built at this point. They're still doing some finishing touches on it, but that's come together. And then there's going to be probably a pause. We'll see for a couple of weeks, and then they'll get into the road reconstruction. Then things will get really exciting with the, digging the roads up and flipping them upside down and repaving. So it should look really good, hopefully in the next month or two. Wayfinding signage program that's continuing. You're probably seeing kiosks go up around town. So that's just plugging along. By mid-March, it should be done. Pocket Park proposed improvements are, there's a public workshop scheduled right now. It's a virtual online public workshop, Saturday, February 26th at 10 a.m. And that's also online. If anyone wants the Zoom link to that, to talk about the some of the improvements there to just create new pathways, basically benches, lighting, and some drinking water fountains. So at least that's what's proposed. And then finally on the on some camp stuff. So we have summer camp registration that's open, and that's for children ages 5 to 12, Monday through Thursday, 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We also have Camp Cotati Spring Break coming up right around the corner, March 20th through 24th. And then a variety of classes that you can find on our registration or recreation page on the city website, as well as just a reminder that SoCo Market will be starting back up in the Plaza Park in April of this year and continuing each month. So that was one of the successful things that came out of COVID, which was nice to see. The owner of Bow and Arrow, Mercedes Hernandez, is the dynamo at the heart of all that, and it's really grown. And not only in Cotati, but also she has a market, a very similar market in Railroad Square in Santa Rosa. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
All right, I will look to the council, see if I see any hands going up. Not tonight, Mr. Good. I think everybody's bowled over by the amount of things that are happening, getting done, or about to be done. And I know I'm very pleased to hear about it. I'm looking forward to when the road project starts in my neighborhood. Typically, people don't say that because it's not a pleasant experience, but I remember how very nice L section looked right after it was done, and for many years thereafter. It is truly a facelift for the community. So that's something I think to be appreciated and look forward. A good way to start the summer. So thank you for that. So this takes us to item 12, which is city council member reports. And I'm just going to look down the list. And if anybody has a report, I'll ask you to raise your hand. Vice Mayor Harvey, you were quickest on the draw, I believe.
Well, I have a whole list. I know you guys thought that I abandoned you because I was at Disneyland, but in fact, while I was on the Guardians of the Galaxy, I did manage to go to plenty of other meetings. So I attended the WACTAC meeting on February 7th, where I turned over the reins to Mr. Mike Healy, and he is now the chair of the WAC for the next 2 years. So there was a lot of information reported, but I won't go into any specifics on that. I also attended the Santa Rosa Plain Groundwater Sustainability Agency meeting, which was very interesting because I was in an airport and we had things that required supermajority votes, but I was able to hang in there on that. So we were able to, some of our contracts, because as you'll recall, the agency had only funded itself through this period of time until the plan was done. So now we have a whole bunch of contracts for administration and grant services and outreach and technical services that all need to be redone. So we have to go out and get some of that. It sounds like Sonoma Water is definitely going to stay with us with the technical stuff. So that's good because they've been wonderful. And we'll see what happens with some of the other things. We had some good comments about the rate and fee study, and there will be a lot more public input on that as we move forward, because while we've submitted the plan and it will take 2 years for them to get back to us, we still have to move forward in implementing the plan, and we still have to move forward with reporting on it. And as of this point, without setting rates, we do not have funding to do that. as of July 1st. So that was really very important for us to work on. I also attended a policy committee meeting for Cal Cities on public safety. They gave us a very good presentation on how some of the cities are addressing various impacts in their city. And the upshot of the thing that's been successful is to kind of find an area where you're having a problem and focus the resources on what is the problem and what are the solutions, and working through those solutions until the problem kind of goes down, and then move on to the next highest priority problem. They've had a lot more success in that, to do that. And lastly, I attended the Zero Waste Sonoma meeting. And at that, the thing of note is that we approved a rate increase for the agency fee. And what it amounts to for most customers is a 34-cent increase on their monthly. But we need to do this because we absolutely have to get composting back. It is, not great that we are out hauling that from a GHG perspective. And we are also not able to provide compost to good quality compost here in the county to all of our residents. And we are still desperately in need of having another household hazardous waste facility, particularly aimed at the North County, because for the new council members, what ends up happening is the household hazardous facility that's at the central gets used by our community and by Petaluma, but the farther north you go, the amount of usage that happens drops off dramatically. And so what that means is if it's not going to a household hazardous waste facility, then it's probably being landfilled. And that is absolutely what we don't want. So it's been a goal of the agency to cite someplace to deal with that in the North County. So those are the big things, and as well as the thing that hit all of us, and that's the implementation of 1383. There's going to take probably, a couple of years worth of education to help folks understand what all the ramifications of that are. And that is my report, and happy to answer any questions.
All right, I see a hand flip up from Councilmember Ford. Whether you have a report or question, feel free to go ahead.
Mine was a question for Vice Mayor Harvey. Did you say this rate, the agency fee rate change, will result in a 34-cent or 34% increase?
34-cent on and the average they utilized was a 32-gallon can. So some will be higher, some will be lower, but 34 cents a month per.
I don't anticipate too many complaints about that. Thank you.
No, but at this point, every little bit, impacts people, but we always like to have that information to kind of really know what the impact is down to our ratepayers.
Absolutely.
Saying that the agency fee is going up $2.75. Well, what does that mean in perspective of the ratepayers? And
right.
That's what's important to me to know.
Yeah, thanks. I was just worried Zoom had omitted a
no.
syllable. So thank you.
No. Yes.
All right. I'm not seeing any other hands at the moment. Oh, wait, I am. Councilmember Moore, go ahead.
I'm gonna have to change the tone of the color of that hand so you can spot that easier.
Well, you wound up in the random window assignment way over to my right tonight. So I have to look at the participants list, but I just saw that your hand pop up there. So you're good.
If anything, I think I'd be much more to the left, but that's another story. We had a library advisory board meeting with the Park Cotati Library. Things are looking pretty good for them. They are currently working on their master facilities plan and looking to determine when they want to or how they want to build that Roseville facility. They're looking at expanded hours for Sundays as well, depending upon the location and the staffing. And they have a new branch manager that came up from San Francisco, so she's doing really well there. So that's going well. I have a remit meeting on Thursday morning. Just kind of the tail end of remit prior to the merger with Parsec, Public Agency Risk Authority, and wrapping those things up on the liability side. And then after that, it should be primarily just CIRA. And then on the 28th, I will be at the Parsec, Public Agency and Risk Management Authority, Parma conference in Anaheim on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. So I'll report back on what happens down there. And that's it.
Very good. All right. I'm seeing no hands up for questions right now. So I have two quick things to report on. First of all, at our most recent SCTA RCPA meeting, we had our realignment, reorganization, and our new chair for the next 2 years is Santa Rosa Mayor Chris Rogers. He will inherit the notoriously difficult job of trying to manage these incredibly long and way too overstuffed meetings. And it's just the nature of the beast. Having had experience running Santa Rosa rather successfully for the last couple of years, I think he'll do a good job of it. So I wish him the best. And our new vice chair there, we have to rotate. If the city's the chair, that means somebody from the county is the vice chair. And this year it is Supervisor Linda Hopkins. So she will be vice chair for 2 years and then quite likely, I would expect, become chair. One other interesting thing from our most recent mayors and council members legislative committee meeting, I wanted to report out on. Two of our members, Mike Healy and also I believe Melanie Bagby was involved. It basically brought some things up at some of our Cal Cities meeting, and I'm sure Councilmember Harvey's aware of this too, to request that we push for, consider that the cities look at divesting our investments in CalPERS that are tied to fossil fuels, the portion that's tied to that. Evidently, historically, Cal Cities has stayed away because there's been lots of calls for divestment here, for this or that. But there seems to be some willingness to consider that. So that is something we might be seeing coming on a city by city basis to assess. And there seemed to be interest from representatives representing other cities in the meeting. So more to report on that when it comes. And I'm sure you might be interested to discuss that. There is also a legislative attempt to do this too. This is Senate Bill 1173 from Gonzalez and Wiener that would force divestment through CalPERS. So one way or another, that looks like this will be a topic of discussion. So we have that going. So I'm going to take one more look at this list, see if I have any more hands up. And I don't. And wait a minute, Councilmember Ford.
Sorry to be so late. I was going to wait till after the meeting, but I figured I should just mention it now. The Russian River Watershed Association Board will meet on Thursday and consider the work plan for the coming fiscal year. So expect that to be coming before us in a couple of meetings.
Well, I look forward to that meeting. It'll be fun to see one of those. I really love that the organization that you sit on is one of the few places that they actually have a budget where they go to each city, meet with their mayor, meet with their staff, and go line by line. And a lot of it is optional. It's designed purposely that way. And I think that's really great. So rarely would I say look forward to talking about a budget, but in this case, that would be good.
Yeah, it's a very good model, and I've been impressed with that. That agency is able to handle a lot of things that otherwise every city would be doing independently.
Yeah. All right. So with that concludes city council member reports. So this takes us to one more public comment item, which is public comment on non-action items. And again, I am seeing no attendees. So unless the city clerk instructs me otherwise, I will move to item 14, which is information received after the agenda was posted. I'll ask staff if we have any.
Nothing further.
Nothing. Thank you for that. So that brings us to what you've been waiting for, item 15. This is adjournment at 8:58. We just beat 9 o'clock. So thank you everybody for a long evening. We started